Santa Claus has come into town. The tradition has. Where did this fictitious story of Santa Claus come from? Its origin is virtually never brought to discussion, televised or publicized, unless one becomes curious enough to begin personal research. The creation of the mythical version of the Santa story is too good not to explore and discuss. It has been discovered that Santa Claus is based on two characters. One of the characters was a real historical figure, and the other was a pagan deity. We are going to attempt to separate fact from fiction. Come on and let's do some digging right here on Open Wheel. Let's get right into it. Who is the real Santa Claus? The name Santa Claus was supposedly introduced into America by 19th century American writer Washington Irving in 1809. Santa Claus was first mentioned in his book, The History of New York. Santa Claus was based on a historical figure by the name of Saint Nicholas. In real life, he was a 4th century Christian bishop of Myra in the region of Lycia, Asia Minor, which is modern-day Turkey. He was born around 270 AD in Patara, which was a port on the Mediterranean Sea in Asia Minor in the Roman Empire. St. Nicholas was born unto wealthy Greek Christian parents. Unfortunately, his parents died during a plague or epidemic while he was a young man, leaving him with a great inheritance. Nicholas, at a young age, was a humble and devout Christian. He followed Jesus' words, which was to sell what you own and to give the money to the poor. With his inheritance, he assisted the poor, the sick, and the oppressed. He was known throughout the land for his kindness and generosity to the needy, for his love for children, and for his concern for sailors and ships. He was known for calming a treacherous storm to save sailors that were out sailing. There was another heroic moment when St. Nicholas saved a man's 3 daughters from prostitution by secretly giving the man money for their dowries. Some accounts of the story of the 3 virgins' dowries tells of St. Nicholas listening to the 3 girls' predicament and his response in coming to their aid incognito. Now the father of the 3 daughters. The man was once wealthy, fell on hard times, and was not able to afford dowries for his daughters, which would eventually force them into prostitution or servitude. During the night, St. Nicholas went undercover to the father's house with a purse of gold coins and threw it into an opening window on 3 separate occasions. On St. Nicholas' 3rd attempt, the father of the house discovered him by staying up for 2 nights or more. The man fell on his knees to thank St. Nicholas for his generosity and was commanded not to reveal to anyone of his gifts, but the man failed to comply. So things are about to get even more interesting as we get into St. Nicholas' actual race and ethnicity. Traditionally, Santa Claus is usually depicted as a heavy-built, white-bearded man wearing a red suit and red hat, all trimmed in white. In the United States, Santa Claus is traditionally pictured through the media, advertisements, and television as flying across the night sky in a sleigh, being led by 8 magical reindeers, excluding Rudolph, who was later created by copywriter Robert May. Rudolph first appeared in 1939 marketing campaign for the retailer Montgomery Ward. The image that we see now of Santa Claus is not how the real Bishop St. Nicholas looked like back in the 4th century. St. Nicholas was, according to several secondary sources, a man of color born of the ancient black Moors of Europe, which made him an European Moor. He spoke in Greek. He came from the race of wealthy black Anatolians during the rule of the Roman Empire. It is often said that the original Moorish history in England was hidden by the Gothic Europeans. Therefore, St. Nicholas, who originally was a tall, slender Moorish black man, is portrayed as a Nordic white male from the North Pole. Santa Claus is a Dutch corruption of St. Nicholas. The Santa Claus that we are familiar with is an image that is believed to be based on a pagan god of the Goths named Odin. Odin is a pagan god in the Germanic and Norse mythology. Some renderings of Odin's name are Woden, which is Old English for Woden, which is Old Saxon. The English weekday, Wednesday, derives from the Old English Woodnesday, which means day of Woden. Odin was often depicted with a long beard, with one eye wielding a spear. He at other times was depicted as a wanderer disguised in a cloak and a broad hat. Odin is associated with wisdom, knowledge, sorcery, battle, war, and poetry. He had two wolves and two ravens that travel all across the world or Midgard to bring him information. Odin also rides a flying eight-legged horse named Sephenir across the sky and throughout the underworld. It gets deeper. Now the Odin story is synonymous with the Santa Claus theme. The fictitious Santa is Odin in disguise. He has a long beard and is a wanderer like Odin. Santa also rides across the night sky in a sleigh being led by 8 reindeers. Odin rides a horse with 8 legs. Odin is seen riding Sephenir in the Thor movie. You will be able to see some physical similarities between Santa and Odin in the Marvel comics, as well as in the Thor movies. Bishop Nicholas lived but suffered through the persecution of the Roman Empire, Diocletian, during his rule. In AD 303, Diocletian ordered Christians to be persecuted for practicing their faith, which led St. Nicholas to be tortured and imprisoned up to Constantine became emperor. In 313, Constantine, with the help of Licinius, created the Edict of Tolerance, which granted Christians their freedom to practice their religion without being legally punished. Bishop Nicholas attended the council held in the city of Nicaea, which is present-day Iznik, Turkey. It was held by the Roman Emperor Constantine in 325 AD. There were over 300 bishops from all over the world that attended this council to debate the Holy Trinity. At this meeting was the heretic Arius from Egypt. Arius believed that Jesus was not equal to God the Father. He taught that Jesus was of separate nature from God because he was born. Arius argued that God and the Son did not share the same existence, which he says contradicts biblical monotheism. He failed to realize that Jesus was God manifested in the flesh, according to 1 Timothy 3:16. As Arius strongly argued his views, Bishop Nicholas became outraged and lost his temper by getting up, crossing the room, and striking him across the face. Nicholas was stripped of his bishop's garments, chained up and thrown into prison, then later was released and reinstated. According to many sources, St. Nicholas died on December 6, AD 343. December 6 became a day of celebration or feast day that was called St. Nicholas Day. December 19th on the Julian calendar. The Dutch kept the feast day on December 6th to shower children with gifts, for they left their shoes out the night before. In the Netherlands, St. Nicholas Eve on December 5th became the time for gift giving. On that day, parents, family, friends, and acquaintances pretended to act on behalf of Santa Claus or his helpers to trick the children into believing that the actual Santa Claus was giving them gifts. The children would either find bags of presents on the front door or they would be decked out in the living room. On December 6th, Santa Claus makes his departure, which ends the feast. Doesn't this behavior sound familiar? This tradition or practice made its way into the United States. Across Europe, churches were being built in honor of St. Nicholas as early as the 6th century. When we come up to the Middle Ages, the devotion of St. Nicholas had become popular throughout every part of Europe and a patron saint of Russia and Greece. During the 15th century, the Protestant Reformation happened, which shifted the St. Nicholas paradigm. The devotion that was dedicated to St. Nicholas was losing its popularity, which made the shift problematic in Northern Europe. The tradition of gift giving to children was now beginning to be challenged because many had probably wondered on what figure was going to stand in the place of the gift giver. Jerry Bowers, author of Santa Claus, a biography, stated that the baby Jesus in some cases have taken place as the gift giver, but less frightening, along with a scary heifer used as a scare tactic against misbehaved children. The date was moved to Christmas from December 6th, yet the tradition was still based on St. Nicholas. The devotion to St. Nicholas that were in the Protestant countries of Europe, excluding Holland, disappeared sometime after the Reformation. Yet the Dutch held on to December 6th feast day as Santa Claus, which is Dutch for St. Nicholas. It is the Dutch that is held responsible for bringing the tradition to America, which evolved into what we know as Santa Claus. When the Dutch settlers brought Santa Claus with them to the New World colonies, the mythological beliefs also came with them. In the United States, St. Nicholas took on the appearance that was based on earlier European deities such like Odin or the European Saturn, appearing as the white bearded man with magical powers, with the ability to take flight. But according to an article in the National Geographic, back in early America, Christmas was more like the pagan Saturnalia. It was more like an outdoor celebration, heavy alcohol, and unruly. By the early part of the 19th century, America had fully embraced the Santa Claus custom, but some of the wild customs and practices were done away with or modernized. Many were not aware of the origins of this tradition. Dutch colonists migrated to New Amsterdam, which is now New York City in America, in the 17th century. Santa Claus was introduced to the majority of those who spoke English by the name Santa Claus. Santa Claus carried the old Nordic folk tales that was fabricated instead of his original and true life story. Over time, Santa Claus developed into the story that we know and believe today. Washington Irving portrayed St. Nicholas as a Dutchman who flew through the skies in a wagon, dropping gifts down chimneys. St. Nicholas' life story underwent several changes over time that was imprinted into history and tradition, even though they were false. The most interesting and mysterious change is how and why the pagans decided to pass off the image of the pagan god Odin as the real St. Nicholas. So there you have it. Santa Claus is a corruption of the 4th century Moorish bishop of Myra, who was a man of color and one of the early fathers of the church. St. Nicholas' ethnicity was washed away and his story substituted with a Germanic faith. That concludes this episode. Who is the real Santa Claus? It is very important to find truth and to expose fairy tales. I find truth is more exciting than fiction. Some fairy tales or myths are used to hide or reinvent a real story with intentions to deceive or conceal. Thanks for listening, and remember, there is spring of water at the bottom of the well.